This is going to be that trap trade that I was talking about in the Telegram yesterday. Anytime we get strong pushes up or if we're trending, I start looking for entries like this. So you can see how you pulled back into that low volume node. It's not always exactly the same. Obviously, sometimes that, we'll pull back and maybe past the previous session and then kind of spring back like this. And normally I'll start scaling into that as I see it starting to push back up. But because we were sitting at that high, I wanted to kind of see that delta come in that you can see right there on the 5-minute chart. And then the first area that you want to look is, can we break these highs? So depending on how hard it's pushing, this one was obvious, right? It was kind of a line drive. So I'm looking for my first area, the first obvious area would be that 750. That also lines up with my normal 27 ticks where I usually take some. So I took some contracts off there. And this was all within the overall concept of once we broke over the previous day's highs, basically where my entry's at, we would probably take out the all-time highs, which is where we're headed. That's basically where that thick red line is up there. That's an old weekly value area high, but it's also where the all-time highs are. And I think as you go through each one of these levels, or how I do it is, I'll pay myself at each level. You can see how I even separate as we would come into those all-time highs. I take some off there because, I've had these turn around on you. And I think as I get better, which is what I'm working on right now, you can start to recognize the nuances of this push is so obvious that maybe you could hold a little bit longer, but you're still getting a pullback at the 750. And I think at these obvious levels, you should be taking some off the table. And then also because it's all-time highs, there's going to be a lot of emotion wrapped around that. I wanted to get the majority of my contracts off before I actually get there. So even though that's my overall concept, I don't need to hold for that exact number. You can see right there the highs where I'm trying to get to. It's how I do it. I've had lots of these, pull into basically where some of those orders are and turn around. And it's pretty painful to give all that back on all of your contracts. So depending on how you want to do it, I think you could move stops up, but you could see even when we hit that 750, there was a pretty good pullback there. So if you're holding, you don't take anything there, that hurts a lot more than just peeling off a few here and there. But on like a trend day, you might have multiple entries like this that you can take. So you're looking for that pullback. You don't want to short that. You definitely don't want to on those strong days. So the first step is recognizing, we're in a trend day or we're in a really strong push. And then you're looking for that pullback to maybe an obvious area that might be the previous session. Like I said, sometimes it'll dip below that. And then you'll get, like we had that delta spike there. And you can enter there, or like I said, I might enter a few contracts, or kind of scale into that. But it all kind of works the same. You're looking, can we break those highs? How well are we pushing? And that's kind of where I'm at. I can recognize the day. I can get in the trade, whether it's all at once or scale into it. And I'm working on that part of recognizing, this one's obvious. A lot of times they're not as obvious. And just trying to do it consistent. Same with taking orders. I try to be consistent. I try to take some at 27. And the way I come up with that 27 is because if you watch the market long enough, you can see people taking orders at 10. So I wanted to take some off before I got to that 10. And that 27 often lines up with, like it lined up with that 750. So a lot of times, it just seems like a good area to take some. And what you don't want to do is, take some at 5 ticks. That doesn't really, you want to take them at areas that make sense. Like even at the highs, it would have made sense to peel one off there. But just because you got 5 ticks on the board, you don't want to get in the habit of doing that. So then on this last contract, you can see I peeled off most of what I had left. And here I was trying to get that push because basically where my order's at, that was right between 100% IB and, the break of fixing that poor high and breaking those highs. But what I try to avoid is, being exact. And then also there's a little bit of, I was making this video to be able to show you the trap. And I really wanted it to complete, but, I try to stay away from, am I holding this to show the completion or do I actually, need it to complete? And when you're only talking about an extra 5 ticks, I'm not worried about the 5 ticks. So as we push up here, I will close this last one. And of course it pops right after that. And actually, one thing is the market pushed another 10 points past this. So I was leaving early and this was my plan. So you can't get bent out of shape, if the market goes farther. I happen to be leaving today, so I didn't even make an attempt to re-enter that. But I will take these trades in segments. And here's a perfect example of why you don't want to be sitting on all those contracts. You want to take some off at the areas that make sense. And then if you miss this trade, you don't want to be hard on yourself because I miss trades all the time. And you want to work on recognizing the circumstances, that this is the time to look for this type of trade because you don't want to take these in rotational markets. But once you figure out, okay, this is the day, this is the type of situation where I should look for this trade, then you have to see the trade. Then you have to be able to enter the trade and recognize where, it's starting to move back up. You certainly don't want to short this type of day. So that's your first step. And then understanding the mechanics underneath it, where the delta should start pushing, and also judging what type of move is this, because some of them don't even get over those highs, or what's your overall concept of where you're trying to get to. Like this today was breaking these highs. That was an obvious number. Sometimes it's not so obvious. So like I said, here I was, the minute I start thinking, I'm holding this because I want to show it on a video, it's time to get out. If it would have popped, obviously, and honestly, I didn't notice. This is about 7 times normal speed, so everything's moving really fast. But I didn't notice that we were that close to that next time period. And like I said, once I started thinking or, wondering, am I holding this at this point to show it on a video? Basically, it's time to get out of the trade because that can skew. It's a little weird to be taping your trades and then having people watch it, and especially having to explain yourself. So I'm not worried about the extra ticks. You're going to see it right here as we push up into that. That's about 55 ticks or 50 ticks right in there. And then we do get that last little pop.